What's up? Content creators are a problem. Influencers, a lot of people in any position of influence and power can be quite the problem. And I have to explain why, because it can affect me. It can affect anyone. And it is this troublesome idea called ego, which is something I've been delving into quite a bit lately in regards to analyzing it and in regards to reflecting upon it, right? It's very interesting to observe ego, and it has a huge influence and role on our lives and how we perceive ourselves. Many may assume it is inherently bad, but there's many different perspectives among it. Something that I often see among content creators over time as they build a following is, an echo chamber can form, and people believe in this content creator and whatever they put out, and it's hard for the content creator to change from their ways, and they feel like they shouldn't because that's where their base of audience is from. They're used to seeing certain types of content. And there's also some problems regarding, introducing new ideas in that case because of cognitive dissonance, which is when you're exposed to new information, you refuse it because of information you currently have. And so I see a lot of ego in different places, and I certainly have seen it in myself. And the more I observe it in others, it makes me constantly reflect on myself. It's quite a process, right, of trying to not try so hard. The question as to why you're trying. The question as to why are you doing what you're doing? Are you conscious of what you're doing? What is the conscious and the unconscious? Can you bring the unconscious to light, and so forth? And it delves into the psychology I think we detail really quite well with healthrevealed.org, the project where, we have a couple great people, Stephanie Mo Davis, Leslie Powers, Scott Gordon, and soon we're going to be inviting many people to join the conversation. You see, when we start analyzing the systems of our world, whether it be political or religious or a simple corporation or business or an influencer, that there's problems with all of these. And it's not to say that all hierarchy is bad and that all ego is bad. It's simply becoming conscious of all our relationships in our life. And one relationship, without looking at another relationship, can often be incomplete. It's like the people who blame one thing all day, and they spend all their time and attention attacking that one thing or claiming that they are this one thing and falling into that identity. And I see this in so many different levels. Oftentimes I say this for my videos, it's like, where do you start when it comes to talking about these subjects? And by no means, because of that hesitation and because I come off with those disclaimers, am I claiming to then be the expert on the subject. I invite you to join the conversation with me. We must approach from a level of humility, of recognizing we know nothing in order to learn something. And it's this irony that we constantly deal with in life that reveals to us a greater truth that is beyond, you can say, duality, beyond the divisions and beyond the different sides, because there's always nuance. So it's a very fascinating thing, and over the past couple months, I've delved quite a bit into metaphysics, and if you're going to call that metaphysics, put a label on it. And it's certainly interesting because I know being able to deliver that again on camera can be rather difficult, but you can ask the team for Health Revealed how much I've been talking about it behind the scenes, not even on the recordings, talking about all sorts of definitions of truth and how we go about this idea of opposites. And I did a whole video before on how if you want to know what to do, you just think the opposite of something. So for instance, you're told that this is healthy and that is healthy, but in reality, it's actually unhealthy. You got to do the opposite of what you're being told to do. Now, again, of course, there's a lot of nuance to that, right? Because somebody could tell you something that's actually healthy, but there's this principle that we see where doctors are destroying health and lawyers destroying justice, and all of these functions that we proclaim to do certain roles, even when they have good intentions, are in the end not manifesting the actual actions that people expect of them to do. And there's a question as to why, right? So there is ego, there is unconsciousness, and it can take place within multiple people in any relationship, which then makes the complication quite hard, especially if you yourself has an ego and you're trying to look at all of it and for a certain aim, right? So we need to be able to really get back to what the Taoists would call that uncarved block, from a position of which we totally are open and able to learn and recognize our ego and see our thoughts as different manifestations, to then be able to, as you can say, wield the elements. And many people will bring this into alchemy and all sorts of spiritual concepts, I'm sure, which I can go down the rabbit hole almost indefinitely upon. It is very certainly fascinating for me to see that I'm following the footsteps of people like, Rudolf Steiner and Manly P. Hall and Alan Watts and Osho and Jiddu Krishnamurti and many others, whom have ideas of which I find to be parallels to some of the writings that I've had upon these more metaphysical ideas. But I don't want to come across too ranty in here, because even the mere nature of words has its problems. And detailing every single problem on my channel can seem almost impossible, because words, as it is not the only way we express in this world. So my role often in my channel, as I often say, is to get people to think, but even more than that is to get themselves unstuck, because some people need to move beyond mind, right? It's not that the mind as a whole is wrong or that you should never use your mind, but it is merely one part of the body. I am looking at the whole of nature, as I should if I'm a health practitioner, and this was, my complication regarding Kennedy and things of people who look at the health field. Being able to see the bigger picture and constantly asking and pleading for that, because the moment we get stuck and we claim we know the truth is the moment where we start to lose it. And understanding this irony is so important. And again, it goes back to humility and compassion, frugality, which is actually the three treasures in Taoism, but you see this across every ancient culture with spirituality, and there's no coincidence. Spirituality may be seen as the greatest alternative to AI and technology and these material man-made systems that often are reflected in the mind, and spirituality is often about getting out of the mind. So, there's a lot of dots you can connect here, and my presence upon the college campuses will help, I would say, individuals awaken to their self in a much greater light through recognizing all these different nuances and navigating them from where somebody is currently at. Which means even if I attempted to make a video like this, going upon their current condition and trying to speak as though I know this generation, I'd be fooling myself. Everybody's at a different stage, at a different level. If I'm going to approach as a coach, I need to work from where they're at. And there's going to be people who back out due to certain things that they see, and again, because they have expectations or they have ego. So let's really nail down here on ego. But I figured to just get some of those disclaimers out of the way, because as you can tell, I'm trying to learn, right? And so let's just get this right out of the way. Of course, you want to be right, but you should also admit to being wrong. And I do my best. Even further, you can ask yourself the question, why do you want to be right? And this idea of, can we force truth? You want to be right. Well, can we be able, from a health perspective, if we recognize nature has a lot of spontaneous practices, such as the fact that the heart beats by itself or the lungs breathe by themselves, recognize an inherent blueprint or an objectivity within nature by which we can work with and nurture into its optimal condition. Right, so perhaps it's not so much about being right, but allowing right, if it is right, to express itself, for people to simply become aware. I don't have to tell someone that something is a problem, right? I don't have to tell someone that something is right. I simply can bring awareness to what is happening, and people are able to then see what is right and wrong for themselves from that position of awareness, without which they cannot get to that final stage. And many people may be pulling people to different ends without the prerequisites, right? Mark Pastor talks about requirements all the time. Well, there are requirements even of requirements, and you have to go really far back sometimes. And you can say some of this you can learn through experience, another through awareness, but ultimately it's an integration of a lot of these factors. And so again, we're all learning, which means that none of us have a definitive understanding of right. And even the language changes, right? The perspective changes. It's limited. You're one person on this earth. So there's a lot of perspectives to see, and the more you see, you start to see the whole, which would make it seem as though you were God, right? Which is why, again, AI is respected. It's a compilation of many ideas and many perspectives, so it can take on the appearance as though it is God, although that would be the most foolish thing we can do, because of course it isn't. And this is why God is actually going to grow in relevance, and I actually recorded a whole video about that, but I didn't publish it, because again, it's about nuance and seeing different perspectives and then being able to describe it. Like, you can try to describe love or try to describe God, and tell me, how good would you be at doing that, right? So you can say this is like an existential crisis of my own, but of course, navigating this through paper can be often easier than word. But the more you are present with your word, the more you may be able to speak as though you are writing a piece of paper. And so anyways, I'll give some example here of ego that I notice. And this to me was very apparent on the flat earth community, which, you know, there's a lot of people I respect from that community, a lot of people who I meet all around the world who believe in this, and this is fine, right? And just because I say they believe in it doesn't mean like I'm not one of them, right? Just like when I criticize different groups, okay? I don't really identify with any group, okay? The point is that a lot of these individuals may be hardened into what they think they know, whether they're on the globe side or the flat earth side. And this wasn't more apparent to me than in the case of the Antarctica event. And the Antarctica event was called the final experiment, where certain flat earthers and globers went together to Antarctica and to prove a 24-hour sun, right? And they used 360 cameras, HD, 24-hour footage, even footage on the plane there and everything. Austin Whitsitt, I think, described his scenario quite well for many hours on end on a live stream. And yet so many flat earthers, despite him being a flat earther, were going against him. And not all the footage was even out yet of them proving that they were there. People were jumping to assumptions, and people still have their videos up trying to say it's fake. What I'm trying to get at is whether it was fake or not, I was there for Austin's support, because I'm like, dude, you have all these people attacking you. I feel bad. Nobody should be attacked like this on the internet, first of all, right? I have compassion for everybody. I don't tolerate like the pity, like little drama on the internet. I think it's silly that people start attacking others for things like that. But even just having mere difference of opinion, people, attack each other online all the time. Now, of course, this is some part just the nature of the internet, but it also is a example of ego, right? Who is the person who's the keyboard warrior in their basement on Twitter, complaining about everybody all the time? And what motivates somebody to do such a thing? And for the flat earthers, I have this position, they have this position, and I learned this position because of other people and their position, and this is my group. And a lot of ego can get involved because of that, right? I see it staunchly on both sides, that it makes me want to say, okay, the truth has to then be beyond both, right? But of course, it always has nuance, where you have to be able to say, hey, I can see where they're coming from, And I tried looking at the situation objectively, and it's just amazing to see the amount of people who call themselves truthers, yet unwilling to really question themselves and their own assumptions, even if they change their mind later. Why did they get so hardened in the position in the very first place? Do they recognize that the process of truth does not end once they reach a certain conclusion? You can say the government is lying to you. You can say that you are an anarchist. You can say that, whatever it is that you claim is this great grand conspiracy of one level or another, or even all of them, there is still not the end to the investigation. And the idea, I would assume, if you call yourself a truther, is to constantly evolve in truth, because there's always a new truth to attain. The idea of truth by itself denotes something that isn't currently the truth. What I mean to say is that it's something that people need to find out. People use it as a term in regards to like an incomplete scenario of investigation, like something that needs to be figured out. And if that's the case, then it's got to be investigated. It's got to be open to all the evidence. So, there's the idea of truth as in like nature or God, but then there's the idea of truth as in like this event happened at this place and this person did that. Like, how sure are you of it? Right? And people often get so hardened in what they think they know. And right, Socrates said, like, I know that I know nothing. And other philosophers have been coined with the same exact phrase. And I use this to preface my whole philosophy, because you have to start from that point. But what if I said that's also just the end of almost all philosophy? And at least from my perspective, looking upon it. If we are to recognize the limitations of knowledge, I did a whole video on the problems of knowledge, we would see this issue of ego come up, okay? So ask yourself what they would think if they did not go, right? Those individuals like Austin Whitsitt and others who actually went to Antarctica, who now are seeing all this hypocrisy within their own movement, what would they think if they didn't go? And what would the followers who are in denial think if they did go, right? Are people able to put themselves in other people's shoes? Because again, this is where we can start to disintegrate the ego, right? Ego tends to compare, tends to divide. And when we start to recognize a sense of unity and placing people on the same level, we get rid of this ego concentration that I'm often speaking about. But like I said, I see this on so many different things. Scientology is another example. There's a big channel growing up in Scientology, and of course he has different relationship issues going on that Jenna Miscavige is referring to. And there's an ignorance to address certain points. And you can see the comment section is attacking them, and people get so hard and they say, oh my gosh, well, it's either now I'm questioning Scientology and the anti-group. A lot of anti-groups are questionable by their definition, because they're not standing necessarily for something, they're standing against something, which is, again, could be a reaction, not something that is actually responsive using consciousness. So I see this, again, in many, many crowds. Many products, many ideologies often exist because of a previous ideology or a previous product. Therefore, the question then comes, is that even necessary to begin with as an ideology or a product? Can we trace it back to the roots? Can we get, again, back down to nature or sort of an objective origin? And as you can tell, that can be quite difficult if you start to ravel yourself into a world of which you do not know you are in, and you see no past to compare to. And again, people will then start to attach to the past, and you can create other problems where you thought they were solutions. And so this is, has to do with statism too, that belief system I talk about on my channel a lot, because there's deception of people thinking they're doing good when they're doing the most amount of evil. There's a collective unconscious. Okay, so I know there's a lot of videos probably online about ego, but how deep do you want to go into this? It's my question to you. I've had appearances where I've gone on people's live streams, and this has only happened with live streamers, And, they'll go like live for like 6 hours on end. Pretty wild stuff. I used to do that 3 times a week. And by the way, I would throw up after each time. It was that wild for my own mental health and sanity. And many mainstream streamers say, hey, this is not the job for you. It's very taxing. And some of them have gotten controversies because they say it's more difficult than a 9-to-5 job, because you have to be constantly creative and people are constantly like trying to find your personal information and all sorts of things about you. I mean, it's not necessarily easy to be influential or famous in this world, which is also why I have videos on that matter too. But either way, I went on live streams like Old World Florida and I was attacked, and at the time I did not really perceive it as that. It was after and reflecting on, I was like, whoa, okay, interesting. That's not really the best way to approach me, but I don't really take offense to what people tell me. So I was just like continuing the conversation and just asking questions and getting really curious. And it was just very interesting to then look on it from hindsight glasses to see that, wow, there was a lot of ego present in the broadcaster for not letting somebody new onto the live stream. And of course, it can seem as though I am complaining now, referring to that. I did a video about it because I said, I don't want people to be alone. This is going to happen to a lot of people who share their ideas. And you see it among just family or friends when you share something with somebody and they disagree with it. And so their ego just takes over. They're like, this has got to be the way it is. What are you talking about? But it's like, I've had moments where I was very young and, I questioned things and I ended up crying because people just did not care at all for my perspective, just asking questions. And, now, of course, I don't cry like I used to, but the sensitive soul in this world, how much plea do we give to them in a world that perhaps values strength? And is that strength really strength, or is it a false form? Can you become stronger through the sense of humility rather than a false appearance or pretension? And these are the questions you have to ask. When you look at the White House and you look at how Trump, you have to sign this bill is for this bill is for that. Yes, sir. Yes, President Trump. And then, there's all these fancy rituals. Can you tell me that any of that is authentic? Can you tell me that any of that is natural, right? My view is that nobody deserves attack, not even Trump, okay? But there's unconscious things that we're just not seeing about ourselves. And the only people I would say deserve attack are people who truly did wrong actions. And it becomes really hard and muddy in the case of politics because you're, writing down stuff that leads to actions, and there's belief systems that lead to actions, but it's not as direct, and as control continues in a more psychological way, people don't know that they're being controlled. People don't know there's coercion going on. Well, in the same way, ego can take on hidden forms. And people may not see it until hindsight, if they choose to reflect on it. And they may not even think it has worthy or time. Let's say some of my appearances, I was a bigger content creator, and my audience, started to talk about it constantly, then they'd have no choice but to address it and to reflect on it. But maybe because I'm not a big enough content creator, they don't want to look at it. Right now, this is just a postulation. It's not a guarantee. But just think about what is required for people to actually start to question themselves, right? And I'm afraid like these people who I have talked to on live streams, and many of them were the past, like a couple years ago on Twitch, and I wasn't the most well-versed, the mere just asked for respect and openness wasn't there, and that's because some of them were just there to entertain. That's what they do as a live streamer, so they're not actually there for a real conversation, right? There isn't an intent that is truly pure in a sense. So again, the question is why? And negativity, emotional appeal often gets more attention, but the flip side can be problematic too, right? Let's stay positive. And again, this is a matter of being stuck on a certain way of doing things. You can associate this with ego. I'm too intellectual, or I'm too emotional, I'm too positive, I'm too negative. Do we have to look at things under this lens? Can we just learn to see that words are words, thoughts are thoughts, right? And not get so offended and also be able to laugh once in a while, be able to have fun. This is important, right? Identity, attachment to ideology, the idea of an ego death relates to everything I'm saying. Getting away from the attachments and ideology and identity, reaching humility. A big problem people will say is social media, right? And it is a big problem with concentrating a lot of these ideologies and getting people into seemingly their own, so they feel as though they're more justified in upholding their position and attacking others. And social media does give an outlet as well to attack others and put on a mask in order to do so. Right. There's also nostalgia of the past, right? Wanting things the way they used to be. And this I find to also be quite profound, because I'm sure you and I certainly have experienced that. But what happens then when we start to get stuck in the past, right? And social media, technology, a tool, right? AI, a tool. How do we choose to use it? Just because some of these things can be problematic or solutions, are we to get so emotional and attached to these different ideas? Even the idea of nature itself, like nature is rather neutral. I'll say it's the answer, but I'm not saying like you should worship it, okay? And the same thing, you know, anarchism, if I'm saying it's reality, I'm not saying it's a philosophy or an ideology. The whole reason is because to me it is getting rid of the ego. It is a psychological and moral process. That's how Larkin Rose and Mark Passio talk about it, which is why they never talk about economics and the physical matters so much. They're all about addressing people's minds and getting them beyond what they currently know and simply bringing it to their awareness. Like, oh, so you want this done to me? Okay, so you believe this, right? And just, that's the candles in the dark method, but that's also reflecting on even just watching a seminar from Mark Passio. We're doing it as the viewer, as the reader, when we sit down and we listen, because again, we're present. And presence has a lot to do with meditation, getting to the uncarved block and getting beyond our ego. And so my lengthy rants, just like this, and I can go back in my videos, are also prone to error. I notice problems in mere language, right? And again, the lack of nuance that I can find even in myself. People can get pulled in. Oh, Court, what you're saying is so true. What these other people are saying is so true. You know, man, people got to follow your work more. They got to do this. And that's not necessarily what I want. In fact, it may go against the message of which I'm trying to portray. And again, I know this can seem confusing. This can seem hard to navigate. Good, right? This barrier in which we are recognizing, this presence of which we are looking to attain, of which we can attain because it is present, to be with the presence, it is something that you're going to struggle with. It's why Osho and Alan Watts, all these guys talk about it's like a purifying, fiery process, and it's not necessarily like enlightenment is a beautiful, peaceful thing. They'll talk about this, and this is why Osho got into quite a lot of controversy too for some of the things he said, right? And by the way, he said the same thing about anarchism that I did, about how it's more of a spiritual perspective. It's one that other people throughout history may have not necessarily had, which is why I also give credence to the abolitionists. They were religious, so they were including more psychological elements into it, right? Psyche means soul. It's a rather spiritual aspect. And no coincidence, Carl Jung and Jordan Peterson and a lot of psychologists delve into spirituality. You start to also see it's a great help for trauma. And many people are healing when they're going to churches, even the non-denominational types around the nation. And so I may not be a fan of churches, but I'm not stuck in my ego to say there is no value there and that people can't heal with certain modalities. Could it be done better? Yes, but so can everything. So let's recognize that, right? We can recognize that numbers are required to shift the world, to change the world. But you, at the same time, must not care about numbers, because you start focusing on the numbers. Now, again, you become into this materialistic, desire-based attachment where you're not producing out of your heart, right? And I talk about this as being important for people who are new content creators to see a lot of these things I'm talking about right now. Is getting out of our own ego, see like, why are we actually creating this? You know, do you have a genuine joy for what you're doing? This would be important. I know that Mark Passio makes it sound like a drudgery, like it's we got to do it because the world's got to be better. I would advise to be just a little wary and careful of that. I mean, Mark has even said that I have the biggest ego and I'm allowed to have the biggest ego. And I think it's a very interesting statement. Again, not to judge bad or good, just observe it, be present with it, right? Why? What's going on here? What's the use of the anger? Is the anger always justified? Why make a seminar on that? And again, just because I say that, it does not mean I have a certain position on it. I love Mark. I love what people do. But I want you to ask the same things about me, right? Why is it that I use certain colors or symbols? I should ask that about myself. And if this sounds like paranoia, well, interesting. People call conspiracy theorists paranoid. What it does is it forces us to be more conscious than we are willing to be, right? To look more at the shadows that we do not want to face. And so I have done many talks on my own, seeing a lot of these different nuances, and I could publish them. I mean, they sound like Alan Watts, they sound like Osho, they sound like these guys, but at the same time, I'm just letting it rip here because I have notes, right? So I'm not going off of the mind, although I like to do so, and invoking again something much beyond it, much more deeper. I don't want followers. If I get them, I've failed. I wrote that as a note. Like, this is a super important note. If I get followers, I failed. I fail my mission. I mean, Jiddu Krishnamurti at the end of his death even said, I feel like I failed because people viewed my content as entertainment. And Osho said that Jiddu was not like laughable. Like, he wasn't entertaining enough. Like, he wasn't throwing jokes in. He was too serious, too intellectual. Well, you know, there's different nuance upon this, but either way, now we live in a world of mass media where we can have somebody way more influential than all these guys of the past, okay? And I want you to believe in yourself and have confidence in yourself. It's not necessarily ego, right? Be strong in what you know, in knowing that you know nothing. in knowing this profound humility, because it will bring you to so much mystery. And through that mystery will come all the secrets of this world that I've been unraveling. And I know some of this can sound as though it is parroting, because when someone says it and another person says it and it's all over the internet, it can start to sound like, where then is the enlightenment coming from? Well, again, you know, I say nature is the answer. What I mean is you need to detach from me as well. You don't need me. You don't need to be a follower. You don't need to be a watcher. You don't need to. I appreciate the support and you clicking on the video. I know that's how the world works in this material reality. But at the end of the day, we have to evolve ourselves. If we're really going to get out of this mess, that's what it's all about, right? That's what the channel's about. And so we have to become our own curator. We can't be the consumer, right? Because we're always consuming, we're always curating. What I'm saying is becoming conscious of it, tapping into that power which you have within you. And so similarly, if I'm giving away an ideology, a certain diet, even a certain way of growing food or thinking about the world, I've also failed. And if you don't know why I'm saying this, it's because perhaps, you know, this is why I'm making the video on ego and different topics related to it. And you say, well, don't we need an alternative? Don't we need something? Don't we need something? Like I just said, all the anti-problems. We need to be proposing a solution. No. You need authenticity. And if you need nature, you need truth, and it's already here, what I'm proposing is exactly nothing. Which is what makes it so difficult to explain with words. It's like the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. It is so profound that you'd be speaking for endlessly, which is why you look at their talks, you look at Mark and all these guys, and it goes hours and hours and hours. I'm already at hours. I've just begun my journey here. I've barely just begun, right? Unraveling the ego to you guys, or your true nature, our true nature, right? And so there are hidden forms of ego moving forward here, okay? And, you know, again, we can refer to a collective unconscious. So I feel bad for Trump. I feel bad for his followers. I feel bad for everybody involved in the scenario in which they believe in something being right or wrong and getting emotional and getting intellectual about it. The guru, right? The person who claims to have no ego, the ego of no ego. I mean, gosh. You can also see this is why people criticize the New Age. They made a whole term for it. Can we observe without judgment? Can we observe our thoughts, see them there, not pass them away, attack them? They're there for a reason, but observe them and be able to sit with them presently, right? Even among people who want change, they may not show up or commit. And this can be an expression of ego on both sides, right? Because I want them to commit. I want them to create change in the world. Like I'm saying, there's people who are unconscious. I want them to be conscious. But there's also the ego in them that says, I don't want to do that. And I want to be lazy, or I want to be distracted, or I don't want to show up to this event. Like there's literally hundreds of thousands of people in my own area who are probably truthers, who care about this world, who want to grow food, or something along the lines of like something that can transform the world radically. The question is, why don't they do it? Right? So it's ego on my part for wanting them to do it, ego on their part for not wanting to do it. And you need to see that within yourself. Like you can't undo one part of this, okay? So even if people don't care and you radically care, in your care, how far do you go with that? Are you aware where your care can be a problem, where your morality, where your natural law, objective morality can be a problem? Because it certainly can be. I think this is no coincidence, by the way, why Mark Passio is making a shadow work presentation. Because the ego death is something that this community radically needs, which Stephanie Mo Davis even said to me, right? And these people, I mean, they've been doing it their whole life. They're counselors and social workers. They see profound things. I'm not the only one, I think, observing ego on all different sides. But needless to say, anyone who's like, oh, you got to follow Mark, you got to watch the seminar, you got to learn this, just know what you're doing. It's not the end. And there's more to that. The natural law, this is the law. Careful now, right? People may not know about their own ego, like statism or any cult, as simple as rumoring or unconscious habits, doing things without knowing, falling to one extreme because of the other extreme, being an influencer and conditioning, you know, without gratitude of where you are. Gratitude can really bring us back to our center, really helps us see where we're at. And again, religions can have this effect on people, which is why they start to become more in humility. But then they can start to expect other people to go down the same path as them through religion. And is it so religious anymore? See, they can degrade the very truth that they once grasped. It's like reaching enlightenment, but not being able to stay in that mode. And because we're constantly out of flux, and this flux we pull ourselves out of constantly, unable to be at a constant balance. We attain balance, but we fall right back out, right? We know we are doing something consciously. We fall back out of that. We're eating something we're not supposed to. We're doing something we're not supposed to. And so what's going on here, right? Again, and I'm asking this question many times, what's going on here? These questions prompt us to challenge ourselves. The past and the future is a trap. What you want to be or what you used to be, right? Nostalgic times and what the future can be, and the world of the free market and the free world, and if people got together and if we didn't have money and blah, 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 blah. Right? People will say that's utopian. Well, it's not utopian necessarily, right? Because whatever we really want to conceive, we will put into action. The problem is actually much simpler than that. It can be our very own mind, projecting onto reality in the very beginning, in the very first place. So both the person who's seeing the future or the past or even the present pretense. They're all just different pretensions. Can we see that? Being able to laugh and play, making fun of ourselves. Like, for instance, my dad makes fun of me saying, like, he's going to put me on a cross because I got long hair, you know, and look like Jesus. Right? Right now I'm wearing a Christmas shirt. I have no clue why I'm wearing this, but it is what it is, you know. It's pretty stinking cold outside still. It's like Christmas. Why not celebrate Christmas every day? Don't really, you know, I'm not really stuck on having to celebrate a certain day, but what I'm calling for is a mass awakening, a mass self-awareness. And the call as such like this can seem as though it is difficult, right? But again, who's saying it's difficult? When I just said it can be as simple as being present. We have complicated a lot of things for ourselves. We have so much power we don't see that we have. So I could be as if saying that we should have more ego, not less. But what I'm saying is to be in harmony with nature, to be moral without flaunting it, without having to talk about it. Because you're showing by example, because you are. You radiate truth from your very being, from your very essence. And if you do not understand the prerequisites to why I say this, you're going to say it's all new age and fake. But it can be observed in the mere language, in the mere way we go about our lives, and the mere fact that we are conscious of all our choices that start to demonstrate this through time. And again, it's all a process of time to learn in the beginning, to show who we are to others. It's a beautiful thing. And if we truly open ourselves up to others, regardless of where they are at, they're more likely to learn from us. So any way you look at this, we need to degrade the ego, in a sense, and see our commonality, our beauty that we all share as humanity, right? This is the process by which we turn the world into one of which is not divided nation by nation and title by title, into one in which people start to actually work together. And in a foresight that sounds utopian, it sounds fake, it sounds maybe even pretentious because many people want to force that. I'm not asking for that. I'm saying the mere presence can bring it into practice. And so I'm simply going to help people become aware of their habits, of what they think, of what they're doing, and I believe things will fall into place. And for the people who are aware already, they're already taking the paths and the steps to engage with, you know, what they see as the truth, which again is an ever-evolving continuum. And so those are the people who are involved with growing food with me, right? Those are the people who are writing books, who are doing all sorts of content. But everybody has that power. Everybody's expressing it in different ways. And some people may be doing it out of large amounts of ego. It's okay. I may have did this video with a title that sounds as though I'm warning about a certain group or a certain type of person. I'm not criticizing the person, I'm criticizing the mentality of which any of us are susceptible to. Which again, the moment we say we're not, we ought to be careful. So I'll leave it at that. A future work of mine, which I've been foreshadowing in previous videos, details this, I'd say, more metaphysically. But you will not get the truth out of me or my words. And that's that. You may want to, you may expect to, you may think that, well, then what's the whole point of the channel? And good, let's ask these questions. But the more you start asking those questions, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to reach this point of which I'm talking about, which you can call the NI, or the natural intelligence singularity. You know, it's just AI singularity, AI is in control of everything, Why not? He's in control of everything. Nature is in control of everything. You see this one, which, many people can call God. And it is certainly amazing, right? But the more I try to describe it, the more it starts to become degraded. And that's precisely why the biblical texts, the churches, the pastures can be problematic, and why people mostly rely on experience. And why those people with experience can't prove what they've experienced. At least they try. Because there's only bits and pieces to the truth, and there's only certain perspectives, and there's this nature of something that is outworldly and not physical. And yet people are expecting there to be a physical, worldly answer to the outworldly, which seems to contradict, right? So there can be a merge between a lot of these ideas, but that all requires seeing nuance and questioning yourself. And so do so. It's not, again, a position of confusion or internal anarchy as what may be described. This is, in fact, actually the very process to how we attain internal sovereignty, internal monarchy, right? Becoming control of ourselves, and therefore being the most free, because we don't have to control ourselves. If we get to that point, this is what the Taoists called Wu Wei, which is why I found it so profound among my path. And my path may certainly lead me to many writers and many people talk about constantly in many different spiritual fields. But for now, this is the video I will release, as crazy and complicated and all over the place as it was. Thank you very much for watching. This is Corey Angelat. Nature is the answer.